A very good evening to you and welcome to The Bottom Line, a wrap of the business news of the day. I'm Frances Hood, and we start, as we often do, with the number of the day. This time it's linked to the oil market, which really shows the upside down nature of world economies right now due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So minus $40 is the number of the day. And that is a reminder, and not happening today, but it happened last week when US oil prices not only went to zero, but into negative territory at around minus $40 per barrel of oil. The negative price was for West Texas intermediate crude oil, which is mainly traded in the US, of course. Brent crude oil, which South Africa imports for fuel and is the global benchmark, stayed positive, but it fell sharply. And tonight we're looking at the black stuff because oil prices are once again in turmoil. Brent crude oil fell below $20 a barrel today, while the US oil fell to just below $10 per barrel. Brent crude oil hit a 21-year low below $16 per barrel on April the 22nd. And the big question is, can Brent crude oil also go negative in future? Now, what's happening is in the oil market is that demand has been crushed. Fewer people are flying and driving. That weighs on prices. Then nations that form part of the oil cartel, OPEC and Russia, couldn't find an agreement recently, started flooding the market with oil. There are currently concerns that there is just not enough capacity to store more oil while countries are still under lockdown. All right, so that was the number of the day. To discuss oil, we're now joined by Izak Odendaal, who's an investment strategist at Old Mutual Multi-Managers. Izak, on the line for us. Thank you very much. So, firstly, let's start with how do prices go negative? It's about storage space, but why don't the sellers just sit on that oil until they can find the buyers?
Yeah, good evening. So yeah, it was very much a freak event in the U.S. market, and as you said, specifically related to that WTI benchmark. And really the issue is that it was a specific futures contract that was about to expire for oil in May. So it wasn't across the board. It was just for that one specific futures contract. In other words, over a certain period of time. But essentially, because of the lack of storage facilities in the U.S., as the supply glut grows, traders in the market were too scared to take physical delivery of oil as that contract matured, and therefore they were prepared to pay to get rid of it, and that's why you saw the negative price for WTI. That specific quirk is unique to WTI. So if you're trading Brent futures, you don't have to take physical delivery of the oil. But in WTI, you have to take physical delivery. If you own the contract and it matures, you stuck with a barrel of the black stuff. And you are stuck with it in a very specific place, namely Cushing in Oklahoma. And in Cushing, the storage is just full.
Okay, so we don't worry about that U.S. oil. We import Brent crude oil, and I have seen debates. Could Brent crude ever go to zero or negative as well? Your view?
It seems unlikely because, as I said, Brent futures contracts you can just settle in cash. So you're not going to get to the point where, you're going to be worried about having to find storage for it if you are the owner of that contract and it's about to expire. So I think it is unlikely, but I think we're dealing here with sort of technical questions, but there's also a deeper fundamental question, and that is, as you alluded to, the fact that there's no demand for oil, there's oversupply. So the negative, the fact that the price turned negative a week ago makes for a very interesting headline. But I think what we should be focusing on is just the absolute lack of demand because the world economy has basically ground to a halt.
Yeah. And like you say, this whole storage issue isn't as pertinent with Brent crude oil, but there's still physical oil that has to be moved somewhere in the world. There are reports that hundreds of millions of barrels are now being kept on ships and things like that because there are no more land sites. Just explain the picture in terms of storage because there is no demand.
Yeah. And maybe also just to add that the prices for current delivery of oil are very low, but if you look a couple of months into the future, the prices are a bit higher. $5 or $6 a barrel higher. So a trader could buy oil today, store it for 6 or 12 months, and then sell it in the future at a higher price and make a profit. So as a result, people are looking for storage options everywhere, including oil ships, pipelines, tanks. But of course, there's only a limited capacity in these things. There's a physical limit on how much oil you can store. And of course, the cost of these things have increased sharply because now suddenly there's huge demand to rent oil ships for storage. So in the end, there's a physical limit on how much oil the world can store. And if it continues like this, we could see further downside pressure on all oil benchmarks. But again, I do think it's unlikely that Brent will go below zero.
All right, so Brent was once above 100 and now below 20 today, although then it recovered. I mean, Izak, did you ever think you'd see these sort of prices ever?
Well, I don't think anyone expected that we would ever be in this position where the world just shuts down. And it's not just one or two countries, it's basically the entire world at once. I mean, economists are scratching for, kind of reference points, but we just never, ever seen anything like this. I think the oil market is, it's got its own unique issues and its own unique features, but ultimately it's very much a symptom of the fact that the world economy is in a very deep recession at the moment.